Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, and I'm here at Shaman's Dream Gifts at the Fox Run Mall in Newington, New Hampshire. And I want to welcome you to our free fireside chat. Tonight's fireside chat is called World Perspective, World Events. Yeah, I have my voice back. Sort of. World Events, a Spiritual Perspective. And, you know, it's very interesting because I kind of, this topic just came to me as something that we really needed to look at. For those of you who don't know, I have a weekly radio show on Ohm Times, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays. We just had one of our camera operators trying to get fired. So, duck under. And then the other camera operator who doesn't realize that you have to duck under the camera when you go help somebody so you don't walk in front of the taping. So anyways, welcome to the comedy stylings of Matt, Mutt, Jeff, and Shaman's Dream Gifts. So I do a weekly radio show, and actually this topic has been up a lot for me lately, which is about world events. And just so you know, if you are looking about more for me, you can go to My Dr. Kevin on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, mydrkevin.com, Pinterest, Instagram. If I'm on a social media, you'll find it at MYDRKVIN. So there's a lot of things going on in the world today. And, you know, we hear more about the bad than the good. And that's because media sells more when they're keeping us scared, when they're keeping us tuned in, when they're keeping us riveted. If you think about it, the human nature, as it, excuse me, as it exists today, seems like something fabulous and wonderful happens, and people talk about it for about 4 minutes, say, oh, wasn't that great? Oh, wasn't that fabulous? Can you believe that child did this, or that person survived this, or whatever, and isn't that sweet and isn't that great? Something bad happens, it's dragged out, it's swung around, it's twisted in as many, well, there could be as many as, what's the population of the world? 2.8 billion people dead because of this. Oh, no one's dead? Are you sure? A little dead? Maybe kind of dying? Right? Isn't this what watching news is like today? They want to stretch it out. They want to try to see if they can get us connected, afraid, fearful. Now, there's a few different things I want to talk about tonight. One is the physical ramifications of buying into a very, very manipulative, biased media. I was recently talking to somebody, and I made reference to yellow journalism. And this person was young enough that they had never heard the term before. And I said, well, yellow journalism is what they used to call it when a journalist would have an agenda. They would write an article from an agenda. They'd shoot a piece from an agenda. That some paper was famous for, you know, going this way or that way. And that they were called yellow journalists. And they were called yellow journalists because white journalists were pure. They just reported the facts. Some of you out there that may be old like me, remember the facts, just the facts, man. From a show called Dragnet. Okay? But nowadays, we don't use the term yellow journalist because yellow journalist and journalist mean the same thing now. The majority of media is bought and paid for by either one conglomerate or another. They're going to, do what they can do to sell subscriptions, used to be newspapers, its viewers, get ratings, be able to do commercials, get sponsors. But the bottom line is that they are going to stretch the truth. They're going to embellish it. Sometimes, you know, it's a very interesting thing. Sometimes I will refer to a story as an MSG story. How many of you guys out there, how many people here know what MSG is? monosodium glutamate. Monosodium glutamate is used in food. Let me tell you what it does. It literally rips the taste buds of your tongue back so that you can taste as if there is more flavor in the food than there actually is. It's like a little piece of sandpaper going like this to your tongue so that they can kind of wave, stick in a chicken leg in 10 gallons, an MSG, and pop it out, and you have chicken soup because the MSG makes your tongue so much more sensitive. If you actually completely got MSG out of your diet, when you ate something with MSG, afterwards you would actually feel like your tongue hurt. Now your tongue is desensitized in it because most things have MSG. Because why should I put a whole chicken in a pot when I can just put in, you know, a wing and a leg and make a pot this big, a chicken soup with 1 spoon of MSG? Why not? So it's really bad for you. I actually am allergic to MSG. And but I call it MSG journalism, an article, because they put in 1 drop of truth and 3 spoons of MSG and create a whole story. And sometimes the truth is, well, sources report. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean when sources report? Well, it means that somebody says, hey, it's kind of a slow news day. Hey, well, you know, I heard some, you know, there was some crazy guy down on the corner, and he swears that you know, he saw an alien come out of the sky. Sources report that we have had an alien invasion. Well, what sources? Who are these people? They can't tell us. But it doesn't stop them from telling us a story that gets replaced, the 24-hour news cycle. So some of this is that as we are looking at world events, one of the things that happens from a physiological standpoint is it's always dire. It's always the end of the world is coming. It's the doomsday clock. It's that we're going to run out of something. It's we're going to get bombed. We have these things that are happening, and what they do is they literally put our adrenal glands into a flight or fight response. They actually gear us up to feel like we should be in some version of survival mode. That the world is going to end. Now, there was a time when we used to refer to somebody who was always talking about the end of the world as Chicken Little. Now we refer to them as an anchor person. Okay? And so as they gear up that, as they leave us in this high intense, they also create a reality of desensitizing us. They desensitize us. They also negatively impact our immune system. They leave us more susceptible. When you are in a flight or fight mode, your thinking will get sharper, then it gets exhausted, then it gets dull. And so this constant fight or flight, survival, adrenal-based journalism that report world events to us all of the time are the major contributors to us being apathetic. That we need the bigger thrill. We need something that's going to wake us up because everything else has put us to sleep. You know, when you say, oh, there's been another school shooting. Was it my school? Were my kids involved? That's what happens. You have enough school shootings, people are desensitized to them. Unless it's in their school and their kids were there. Oh, you know, that only happens in those redneck conservative places. Or those, you know, fluffy bunny liberal places. Whatever place is not yours is the only place they happen in until they happen in your place. And then when you knew the child that got killed, and you can't forget them, then it becomes very real. But then if you say, hey, wait a second, how can we have had so many of these and have had so little done about it? And why is this happening? And we're not asking the right questions if we're not changing it. And you get behind that, oh, well, you know, nutcase. They used to be normal, and then, you know, yeah, they lost a child, and that's really tough, but you got to go on with the world. Why are they still talking about it? Well, because they have a dead child. They have a child that would have been standing behind them if maybe on the last school shooting there would have been some change made. But guess what? Change, unless it involves violence, is not newsworthy. How often do you actually see a really peaceful demonstration given more than a minute and a half? Right? Now, if there's gas masks involved, if something's destroyed or destructed, boy, well, hey, that's sensationalism. So, our world events, first of all, are magnified and given to us in a lens that is created to disengage us. To literally burn us out. To burn out our ability to feel, because how many times can you feel? How many times can you get upset? How many times can you rally the troops before you just get exhausted? You just get tired. You just can't do it anymore. And this is part of it. Because as these problems are created, as we get more susceptible to illness, as we're more likely to eat bad food, sometimes known as comfort food, as we are more likely to become apathetic and be less energetic, are less likely to take really good care of ourselves, well, we have to watch the next installment. First, it's the next installment to find out, you know, is the world going to end? And then it's the next installment of Downton Abbey, followed right by it. There we go. Sedentary, gray, somewhat depressed, apathetic, with a compromised immune system, fuzzy thinking. Why would our media and the people who own it, and our media are owned by the top 5%. Every major media outlet, if you follow the money flow up, goes in the pockets of the top 5%. Every major media outlet. So why would they want us so disenfranchised? Why would they want us to be so downtrodden, depressed, inactive? Well, because if we're not, what are we doing? We're challenging things. We're trying to change things. We're trying to put things out that says, wait a second, why should 2%, the top 2%, have more wealth than the bottom 50%? That's the last statistic I heard. Top 2% have something like $2.3 trillion, which is more than the bottom 50%. Oh, and they give some away. They donate it to help people. So on one hand, I'm going to make you sick, depressed, no self-worth, no self-esteem, feel like you can't go anywhere, feel like you can't do anything. I'm going to help contribute to stress-related diseases in your life because I'm not going to pay you enough to live a decent life. I'm not going to let you off the gerbil wheel. I'm not going to ever empower you to stand up and easily follow your passion. No, I'm not going to do those things because I don't make money on those things. Those are not the things I make money on. And then when I have an obscene amount of money, I can give it to charity. You know, I love it because this is just a repetition of history. You know, if you've ever been to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you've ever seen some of the stuff that Carnegie Mellon have put out, and you know, and you have the Carnegie Mellon Foundation now, and you have all of the robber barons, and all of the train people, and all of the steel workers, the steel magnates that were the obscenely wealthy at the turn of the 1800s into the 1900s, that built like 76-room mansions in Newport, Rhode Island. that they were making all their money off the back of immigrants, that there wasn't even no minimum wage they had to pay to them. Okay? But then, near the end of their life, well, I'm going to set up a little foundation, and everybody will remember my name by my little foundation. Some of the greatest foundation givers, their founders were the biggest crooks. They were cruel. They were mean. They made Scrooge, in the early part of the movie, look like a good guy. We just had a cave-in, digging for steel. We've lost 150 workers. Well, when are you going to get it open? Every day it's not closed, I lose money. Who are those 150 people to that guy? Somebody that he can replace, because there's another 150 coming over across the boat. And now there are giving institutions. Their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren at this point are the philanthropists that do so much good in the world. Yeah, well, that's because their great-great-grandpa screwed so many people so they could be doing good in the world. Yeah, that sounds like something you should feel really honorable about. And don't ever think they give away more than they keep. Or that they ever don't keep enough to still fall into the obscene category. Now, I'm not against charity giving. But I want you to, again, remember, world events are organized and presented to us, for the most part, by the people who are benefiting from their presentation. People who benefit from keeping us from stepping out there and making a difference. So, from a physiological standpoint, physiological into an emotional standpoint, and even to a mental standpoint, we have a beaten body, a destroyed self-worth and self-esteem, a bad attitude or no attitude at all, as we walk zombified through the world. Okay? But we want to talk about a spiritual perspective. Well, one of the other things that it creates is if you are convinced that you're not as good, or you can't make it, or you can't go as far, if you are convinced that somehow no matter what you do, you can't go anywhere, which is a fallacy, then you fall into that and you become entitled. You become a victim. You can become a professional victim. Somebody who expects that because of whatever hand that the world has dealt them, that the world owes them everything, and that they have to be taken care of. And there's a difference between giving somebody a hand up and enabling somebody to stay in a, I'm going to call it a pathetic no man's land. Well, I'm really nobody. I'm everything I shouldn't have to. I'm really nobody. I don't make a difference. You can't expect me to work. I can't work. I have stress in my life. I can't work. You don't understand. You've never had stress in your life. Am I saying that all of those people are playing the system? No. But are you telling me that none of those people are playing the system? Well, there's some clouds in your head that need to get separated. Because there's a lot of them that play the system. There are a lot of them that have been trained to play the system. A lot of them have been trained that that's their role. Their role is to play the system. And they do equal parts of no self-worth, no self-esteem, and entitled arrogance beautifully well. And they have both. They're dealing from both decks. If you ask that they should be responsible for something, that's beyond them. So we look at a spiritual perspective. Why is all of this going on? What has happened to humanity that has brought them to this point? Well, you know, what'd you say? There is always the offset. We worship we worship false idols. Sometimes those false idols that we worship are football players, or Hollywood actors or actresses, or beautiful people as portrayed on a magazine cover. And every one of those beautiful people in their daily prayers thanks God for Photoshop, because they don't ever look that good in real life. Okay? We have a division within us because we have religions that say the only way to God is through our doors. And as you pass through those doors, we are going to point out your faults. We are going to remind you that we are your way to God. We are your way to heaven. We are your way to nirvana. We are your way to whatever you want to call it. But they are going to give you, for a price, a pathway that means you don't have to have a relationship with God yourself. In fact, some religions teach you can't have a relationship with God if you aren't doing some part of some church. If you haven't, I love this, because many years ago I was traveling down when I was moving from here to Virginia. Now we're talking the late 80s. Was the Deep South really ready for me? Probably not. But I get down there and I went by this row of churches. There was like 8 or 9 of them, and every one of them had a reader board that told you why the other 8 or 9, all of them some form of Baptist church, was the wrong one and this one was the right one. So, and so you had to be born again. Well, if there's 9 Baptist churches, do you have to get born again in all of them? Because the other 8 say, yeah, no, that wasn't the right one. You didn't accept the real Jesus. Our Jesus is the real Jesus. Our God is the real God. Our guy is it. Come over here. It's kind of like somebody selling trinkets, cheap trinkets at a fair. Over here, we have the charmed life for you. We have the way. Our religions have become so much about power and judgment that actually one of the fastest growing denominations in the U.S. is a non-Christian based religion. They welcome Christians. They say Christians are just like everybody else and welcome, but they are not a Christian based church. So they don't say, hey, it's either or. You can't be a Christian and come and see us. They're just saying, we don't tell everybody that Christian, you can be sitting next to a Jew, and you can be sitting next to a Muslim, and you can be sitting next to a pagan, and you can be sitting next to a Wiccan, and we think God wants them all. We think God wants them all. And so when we look at the world, how much of what we look at as crisis is a one-upmanship contest on your God versus my God? How many of the wars today can we look at it and say that had nothing to do with religion? Did Brussels have anything to do with religion? Yes. Did Paris have anything to do with religion? Yes. Does the daily killings in Pakistan and India have anything to do with religion? Yes. Not all Christian religions. Look at, the Muslims and the Jewish in, the Middle East. Neither one of them are Christian religions, So I'm not picking on Christianity. I'm picking on all religions that somebody has to turn around and say, I am disenfranchised. And the only way I can be enfranchised is has a God that to have a God that I can interpret in a way that says I can take my power back from you by killing you, by oppressing you, by enslaving you. The only way I can be better is if I make you worse. you have to pay. You, the Buddhist, has to pay. You, the Wiccan, has to pay. You, the Christian, has to pay. You, the Muslim, has to pay. Whoever it is. And we consistently see it in every religion. And yet, there is not a single religion out there that says, hate thy neighbor. So this destructive, toxic, fed world from so many religions that underneath the core are teaching hate and judgment and bigotry. When you say, oh, we're not judging them, I don't know if any of you have been following the Divergent series. There's Divergent, Insurgent, and then Allegiant. But, you know, the Divergents were the ones that they were different, and so they had to be executed because they didn't fit into one little box. But then at some point, the Divergents became the heroes that were the new way. And then there are those that are damaged. They're damaged. It is a perfect analogy of what every religion, one way or another, or the majority of religions out there around the world, are somehow communicating to their people. And it is playing out through world events. Because even though we are getting hyped up, coke addict journalists when it comes to reporting religions, reporting news and making stories and dragging people in, and even all of that is true, we still have a world that is a mess. We still have a world where we throw away food and people go hungry every night. Right here in this country. We still have a world where, in large parts of the world, you can be punished for your skin color, your God, your gender, your orientation. You can be punished because you looked funny. We talk about how much humanity has evolved. You know, if a deformed child was born 500 years or 750 years ago, they might have drowned it. It wasn't meant to be born. We would look at that today and say, that's barbaric. We're going to take care of that child, and we're going to raise that child, and we're going to give that child a life. And that child may spend their whole life as a semi-vegetable in an institution. But we won't let it die. Okay? But those same people will decide who's not good enough for their church, or who's not good enough for their, for whatever. They will still judge. They will still, I'll let you live, I'm just going to destroy your whole life. And we see it all the time. We just had just two things, We had North Carolina that just passed something that makes, basically takes the rights away from cities to pass LGBT discrimination things. And now it's a state law. And, and if there's blowback, and there's going to be lawsuits and stuff like this. Georgia was getting ready to pass it too. Why did Georgia's governor not sign it, if any of you were following this at all? Well, because Disney and Apple and Marvel and all of these places that are bringing millions and millions of dollars into Georgia said, hey, we're out of here if you sign that. And the governor, and he's a conservative Republican, I give him credit, he goes, I am here to serve the people of Georgia and the state of Georgia. And this bill does not do that. So he wouldn't sign it, he vetoed it. But still, even though we have to have that discussion, why do we have the world we have in? Because we have people who say, I have a right to impose my religious belief system on everybody else, even if you don't pray at my God, even if you don't go to my church, even if you don't live in my neighborhood, even if you don't live in my state, even if you don't live in my country. If I have a way to make you follow however I interpret God, then I will do so. Through legislation, through violence, through harassment, whatever. And so when we look at the world events going on, Why did Brussels happen? Because we had a bunch of disenfranchised people who felt that the only way that they could figure out why they were born in villages that were starving, or felt like they were neutered, that somehow that they were never going to have a chance to live a life on this plane, could strap bombs on them because they'd be rewarded on the next one. Well, you know what? Sounds like to me like you ain't got much to live for in this lifetime if you're such in a hurry to get to the other one. But we do that. It's all about rewards next time. It's all about consequences next time. It's not about this time. It's not about here and now. And one of the things I promised in this talk was the things you could do to shift it. The number one thing that most keeps this going, some people say, very famous quote, when good people do nothing. But it's not just when good people do nothing, but it's when people do not accept the responsibility that they are responsible as humans for all of humanity. That there is a responsibility for all of earthlings. We have a responsibility to the trees. We have a responsibility to the animal kingdom. We have a responsibility to the mistreatment of all species and all creatures. Now, I'm not saying that you don't get to live your life. You don't get to live your joy. I'm not saying that your every day should be about everybody else, because then the well runs dry. You've got to take care of yourself. But the more that we encourage, the more that we support, the more that we share, you take responsibility. Because part of the reason we're here is no one wants to take responsibility for their actions. Everybody wants to do the excuses. And then, when it isn't that fluffy liberal town, or that redneck conservative town, where that school shooting happens, and 12 second graders get killed, when it's at the school that is 4 blocks from your house, and you say, why? Well, what have you been doing for the earth lately to make any kind of change at all? Pick something. You can't do everything. And when somebody says, well, you know, I would do more, but there's just, you know, whatever I did would just be so little, and, you know, there's just not enough time in the day. Oh, excuse me, I gotta go now. Downton Abbey's on. If you got enough time, if everybody listening to me right now and that watches this today, tomorrow, whenever, watches it later on Periscope or on Facebook or on YouTube, if everybody said, I'm going to add up all the time but I want you to start tomorrow. And without being, I want you to just do all of your habits and patterns as you have done them. And I want you to keep track of how much time do you spend doing either computer, like computer games, Facebook, TV, video games, things that do not add to the sum total of your soul. And I'm not saying give them all up. We all need a little self-nurturing time. We all need a little loving time. We all need to have something that we do that can make us relax and de-stress. I'm not saying I'm going to ever ask you to give it all up. But what would happen if you kept track of that and you said, you know what? I spend 40 hours a week at a job, and I realized I spend 55 hours a week doing something that is nothing. Let's say it was 55, and you took 20%. That would mean 11 hours a week. Maybe you would volunteer, get into a cause, put something out, help in some way. Now some of you would come back and say, it doesn't even equal 10 hours a week for me. Good, so give 2 hours. What are you doing with the rest of the time? Are you being a workaholic? Or a rageaholic? Or an alcoholic? Or a sexaholic? Are you engaging in self-abusive behavior? Because I am putting that there is a line where crashing and kicking back and watching something on TV or watching a movie, playing a video game is healthy as a small part of your week. Even if you spent that time and said, I'm just going to go out in the park and walk around. Maybe I will do an act of kindness. Maybe I'll go to a local nursing home and go sit with somebody who doesn't have any relatives and bring a little joy into the life. I don't know. Go play with the dog in an animal shelter. I'm not going to tell you you have to join a political campaign. Okay? But do something. Come on in.
How are you?
Good. So anyway, I'm wrapping this up. I want to thank you again. World Events, A Spiritual Perspective. I hope that you found this helpful. Next Monday night at 7 p.m. we'll be doing another fireside chat. If you can't make it into Shaman's Dream, then you can watch it on Periscope, or you can watch it after the fact on Facebook. Also, we're just getting ready. We're just closing out the month of Easter, and all of our egg-shaped stuff is still 10% off. And this week, our butterflies. I don't know, can the camera people show us some of our butterflies around here? All of the butterflies are 10% off right now. You know, our butterfly, like I like to say, our butterflies aren't free, but they're 10% off. So if you want a little one to fly into your life, come visit us at Shaman's Dream here in the Newington Mall. Thank you, and again, my name is Dr. Kevin, and come visit me and like my Facebook fan page at mydrkevin.com, MYDRKEVIN. And thank you.